The two planes flew into the two towers.
The people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
As a nation, there's nothing we can't do.
Think about your job, your political views, where you grew up, your religious beliefs. On September 11th of 2001, we put all of those things aside to just be Americans. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Gatson. We're in downtown Lexington at the 9/11 Memorial, welded with two steel beams from the World Trade Center. It is a point of reflection for a tragedy that will live in our hearts forever. It's the day that changed the world. 8:46 a.m., a jet crashes into the World Trade Center's North Tower in New York City. Minutes later, another plane slams into the South Tower.
People started screaming that there was another plane coming. I didn't see the plane, but I turned around and the second building just exploded.
As soon as it got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out.
I heard a big bang. And then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building.
These New York policemen and firemen, God bless them, they kept us calm. They tried so hard to keep us moving north, and it was just absolute horror. It was horror.
The two planes flew into the two towers.
In less than 120 minutes, both towers collapsed.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
A third plane crashes into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, and a fourth plane is headed to Washington, D.C., but passengers overtake the hijackers. Instead, that plane crashes in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. In all, more than 3,000 people from 83 different countries are killed.
Everything's relative when you look up there and you don't see the World Trade Center. It's unbelievable.
For survivors, time stands still as lives lost are remembered. President Bush now tasked with keeping an entire nation calm with a promise of justice.
This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Suspicion quickly falls on international terror network Al-Qaeda, but it will be 3 years before Osama bin Laden claims responsibility and another 7 before he's killed by special ops at his compound in Pakistan. Now a decade later, the images still fresh. Memorials a testament to the resilience of the American people and a tribute to those who put their lives on the line for liberty.
5 million Americans who've worn the uniform over the past 10 years. They were there on duty that September morning, having enlisted in a time of peace, but they instantly transitioned to a war footing. They're the millions of recruits who have stepped forward since, seeing their nation at war and saying, "Send me." They're every single soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardman serving today who has volunteered to serve in a time of war, knowing that they could be sent into harm's way.
One of those servicemen is Victor Correa. The retired Army colonel lives in Elgin now and is a reserve deputy for Lexington County. 10 years ago, Correa was living in D.C. and working at the Pentagon. He had just sipped coffee with his co-workers. Minutes later, he was alive. They were dead.
In my mind and thought process, it came to me, I'm okay. Nothing has happened to me. Let me go and help those that probably need help.
Susan Elizabeth Littlefield has his story.
September 11th started like any other morning. Go to work. You get with your friends, co-workers. I heard some rumblings, people saying, hey, you got to see what's happening in New York.
President Bush has been on the air. He was in Florida at the time saying apparently this was a terrorist attack. Everyone now believes that.
That's when we returned back to our work area to get ready to activate the cells that we have when there's an emergency. As we're doing this, my co-worker, his name is at that time Major John Jessup, looked at me and said, sir, this could happen to us right now, and we would not be expecting it. He had not finished saying those words when we were hit. And that's how my day started at approximately 9:30 that morning.
It felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon.
I could see like wind coming before the ball of fire and lifting the panels up in the ceiling. The smoke alarm system went off immediately. I started hearing people screaming. It turned dark. I felt it was my duty, my responsibility to go back and help those in need because I was blessed to have survived the initial impact. And there was a thin line that decided who made it and who didn't. And I missed that line less than 5 yards. So I got on all fours and started crawling into the smoke, the darkness, feeling my way around and screaming also, if I could touch people. I wanted to look good in my uniform. So I tucked my shirt in. It was stained with fuel. There were blood stains and some human flesh in there also. And walked to the bedroom. And at that time decided, well, I need to take all this off, take a shower. And I needed some time to myself. In that process, I fell flat on my face. I had hurt and dislocated my hip. And the adrenaline rush had kept me going for all these hours. Not until my body was able to calm down did I notice that I did get hurt. I look at the bravery of the firemen and the policemen. They ran into there. They had an option, but they knew what their job was and their responsibility, and they went in there. They paid the ultimate price. Those are the heroes.
Correa received the Soldier's Medal. That's the highest honor that a soldier can get outside of war. He also got a Purple Heart. These days he lives with his family in Elgin, his wife and 5 kids, and he works as a Lexington County Reserve Deputy.
Overnight, our idea of security was shattered. Bomb-sniffing dogs, long lines, and pat-downs, air travel in America forever changed. Hannah Horn shows us how.
I remember actually being here the day of the 9/11 attacks with a group from Boston. Their commercial airline jet had to land here in Columbia. In the days and months and years that have followed, there have been monumental changes now having to balance your security flying with your civil liberties.
Something I'll never forget.
In Randy Blackman's decades of law enforcement, 9/11 created what he called an eerie feeling around Columbia Metropolitan Airport. This is video from that day as airplanes were grounded and stunned airline passengers waited for answers.
I guess planes have been crashing.
Back then, a simple metal detector was all that stood between you and the gate. And remember when you could park curbside?
Since 9/11, our security postures have changed dramatically. There are several layers of security, most of what the traveling public never sees.
Law enforcement and Homeland Security's TSA work together on 20 layers of security before flight, while you're at the airport, and even while you're in the air. Federal Security Director Eric Bean.
We're waging a war against human creativity, and so we have to continually make sure that we're evolving to meet that threat.
The x-rays and body scans are only a few ways. Others include behavior screening, document inspections, and canine and bomb detection teams.
In the process, there is a balance in how do we keep the transportation as safe, as secure as possible, while at the same time ensuring that people's civil liberties aren't violated.
And even in Columbia, a relatively small airport, expect security here to be as tight as anywhere.
Anything can be introduced from here in Columbia and could end up in Boston or any other airport throughout the country and throughout the world.
10 years later, there is no sign that the technology or security will be slowing down at these checkpoints. Columbia Metro TSA officials tell me that they hope to improve their x-rays and document processing within the year. At Columbia Metropolitan Airport, Hannah Horn, WIS News 10.
Still ahead, being Muslim after 9/11, how the relationships between different faiths have changed in the Midlands, and they were just kids when it happened, but that didn't stop local students from helping firefighters hundreds of miles away. For Muslims living in America, it was a double punch. Their country attacked and their faith instantly tarnished. But in the Midlands, Islamic leaders say there was more support than backlash. Jack Kinsey has that story.
It is 1:30 on a Friday afternoon at the mosque known as Masjid al-Muslimin. More than 100 men pack one of the rooms for one of 5 daily prayer services. There are more in another part of the building and a third room filled with women. To an outsider, it appears to be a sizable turnout considering the day, the time of day, and the fact that this is taking place just off Gervais Street in South Carolina's capital city.
I'm grateful that I am in Columbia, South Carolina.
Leading the gathering, Sheikh Mohammed Adli, the Egyptian-born imam, has been the mosque's spiritual head since it opened in 1981. He helped guide the Midlands Islamic community through difficult days following the 9/11 attacks. But Adli says he saw few indications of non-Muslims trying to lash out at his followers.
There is few things you can hear it sometimes, people shouting, driving cars, but this, most of them, I don't think they are people of Columbia. They may be people passing through or visitors here for whatever.
In fact, in some ways, the imam says, 9/11 brought Muslims and those of other faiths closer in the Columbia area.
When these events took place, I understand September 11, we found leaders of Christian communities. They came here to show support, assistance, and even some of them, they offer their service if our women is scared to go to the store, shopping, anything, they'd be glad to assist them, send their wives to assist our wives. Some of them, they brought flowers, some of them brought cards.
Many of us might not have expected such benevolence, not at a time when so much fear and anger was sweeping the nation and South Carolina. This is, after all, a place dominated by conservative politics, a place where old ways of thinking quite often die hard. Dr. Warren Larson, though, was not surprised to see harmony between the two communities. He heads the Zwemer Center for Muslim Studies at Columbia International University. Larson says relations between Midlands Muslims and Christians were pretty good before and even after 9/11.
Most of the Muslims in the world, and I've said this for the last 40, particularly last 10 years, most of the Muslims in the world are not that way at all. They're just like we are. They're just trying to get through life. They're just trying to get their kids through school.
That said, Larson believes people of both faiths still harbor underlying suspicions about each other.
I think that in their heart of hearts, Christians are not so sure about them.
Imam Adli sees evidence of that every time he goes through security at Columbia Metro Airport.
The things they do to me here in Columbia, South Carolina, when I go to Chicago, to New York, understand Charlotte, I don't see the same thing.
More reason, Dr. Larson says, to use the 9/11 anniversary as a catalyst for prayer this Sunday. The school is promoting an event called Moving from Fear to Faith.
And what we're trying to do is to get people to actually meet Muslims as friends, probably visit a mosque, and most of all to pray for them on 9/11. Pray that God will bless them, and also pray, I think, in addition to that, that the next 10 years will be better.
I believe the more that the people dedicated to their religion and their beliefs, the more they can be kind to each other, the more they can be respectable to each other, because this is part of the teaching.
Jack Kinsey, WIS News 10.
Coming up, where were you on the day no one will forget? Plus, young and old, united we stand. Students band together to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for New York's first responders. Where were you on that tragic morning? I remember. I was in a hospital room with my dad, who was recovering from heart surgery. We were watching the Today Show and just couldn't believe it when we saw those planes fly into the towers. I remember hearing one of the reporters speculate about a possible mechanical problem with some of the equipment on board. And I remember thinking at the time that when you see a building like the World Trade Center in front of you, you don't fly into that by accident. I bet you remember too. In fact, a study by the Pew Research Center shows that according to 1,500 people who were surveyed, 95% remember exactly where they were and what they were doing. Here are a few of the stories of how the news reached folks here in the Midlands.
Complete shock. I mean, at first I really did think that it obviously had to have been some type of freak accident, but then when the second plane, flew into the other tower, we knew, I knew immediately that they were right. It was a terrorist attack.
The day before September 11th, my grandfather passed away, so it kind of was on top of everything, just shock, and I had so many questions, but also it was kind of quiet.
It seemed surreal. Like, we didn't really understand until they turned the television on, and we had to figure it out, like, okay, that was real. And then I realized that I had a family member in New York at the time who had a meeting in the World Trade Center, which was pretty scary.
I was in like 4th grade at Saxgotha Elementary School. One of the teachers comes in and tells my teacher, Miss Jacobs, to switch to the TV real quick, and like you can see tears coming out of her eyes, and I didn't know what was going on.
I was stunned. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I had no idea what really was going on, because then you began to hear about the other planes crashing as well too, and it became a really terrifying few hours. I remember immediately calling my wife and my children and making sure they were okay, and told them they should probably come home till we figured out what was going on.
Many people shared their stories with us on the WIS Facebook page. Christy Schrader posts, "I was teaching 2nd grade. I knew something terrible was going on, but I had to keep teaching." Janet Dasher writes, "I was watching the Today Show and I saw the second plane hit the towers. I was talking to my oldest daughter on the phone. It is a day that no matter how much time goes by, I will never, ever forget." And Beth Cockrell posts, "I was sitting in my freshman U.S. history class in high school. I remember a teacher coming in with tears in her eyes, telling us to turn on the TV. Such a sad day all across the country as we grieved as a nation of one." Still to come, driving patriotism, how local students bought a fire truck and what they think about that project a decade later. For the students and faculty at White Knoll Middle School, 9/11 will be remembered as a national tragedy that turned into a huge school project. They raised $250,000 to buy a new fire truck for New York City. 10 years later, it has left a permanent mark on the school, a firehouse, and the students themselves. Taylor Kearns has their story.
Most of the students at White Knoll Middle School are too young to remember what the faculty will never forget.
Somebody came running down the hall, and I must have been about 9:30, and said, "Turn on your TV, turn on your TV."
Principal Dr. Nancy Turner remembers that day and the days that followed. She says the school wanted to help, but wanted to do more than just collect money.
I heard a report that X number of fire trucks have been buried in all that rubble. And I said, well, that's it. That's what we'll do. Let's buy a fire truck.
I am here to share a bright red, shiny dream with everyone.
The task of raising $250,000 seemed insurmountable at the time. Stacy Smith was 12 years old.
Now we look back on it, we realize how big of a deal that was. We didn't realize at the time.
Smith recalls the whirlwind of fundraising. As their notoriety grew, so did the donations.
Everybody around here was awesome at donating and helping us out and everything. I remember going to the USC football games and we'd just walk around when we had, they'd let us wear a little fireman hat and stuff like that, and we'd just walk around and people would just throw in $20 bills and whatever, trying to help us with everything they could.
When the time came to take the check to New York, Smith was one of the 4 students selected to go.
You know, when we were 12, we were like, oh yay, we get to go to New York, this is cool, we get to represent our school, but we didn't realize the magnitude, like this is serious, like we're on national news.
At any age, riding in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade with Giuliani and Joe Torre would be unforgettable, an experience Smith remembers every Thanksgiving, along with the memory of what she and her school accomplished.
We look back at it and we're like, dang, we did a good job, you know, all the students at White Knoll Middle School and, you know, everybody else that contributed to it, but we did a good job. Like, everybody banded together and did a good job.
In the end, they raised more than $500,000 for a truck still in use by the Red Hook Raiders, a Brooklyn firehouse that lost 7 men that day. Their story and the generosity that followed remains on display at White Knoll, both as a reminder and a lesson to the next generation.
I think if anything, it taught our kids that if you set your mind to something, you can accomplish anything.
10 years later, there is no question September 11th continues to impact our minds and hearts. We all carry something different, but it all resonates the same. Today, we remember those who are gone, and we give thanks for those who surround us. From Lexington, I'm Judy Gatson. God bless our troops, our first responders, and God bless America.